Well, continuing on with our sponsor support and news from the province of Ontario today, we're welcoming Melanie Robert, who is the VP and CMO for the Destination Ontario, where she is leading the organization's marketing, strategy, and insights team, including the key functions of marketing, technology, insights, and creative services. Welcome, Melanie.
Hello, good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, the minister talked about some research that they were going into, and I wasn't going to press her further on that because I know that's going to be a big part of your presentation this morning. So why don't we jump right in, and I'm going to throw the reins over to Melanie.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I think she said she's actually in field right now, so I imagine we'll see some of that to come, but I have pulled together as much as I can get my hands on today to give us some signals of intent and where consumers are at. So with that, I will share my screen and say good morning to everybody. All right, let's just make sure this is in presentation mode. Right. This is what I never know what to do with. Oh, shoot, sorry. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Melanie Robert, and I'm working on marketing at Destination Ontario, as Dave kindly said. And thank you to FEO for inviting us to talk a little bit about consumer confidence and signals of intent. So let's get into some data. I hope you have a hot coffee, and we'll get started. Before we get into the numbers, though, I did want to share a quick update of what Destination Ontario is doing now to help with rebuilding and recovery. So as mentioned, Destination Ontario is the provincial marketing organization for Ontario. We are an agency of the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Culture, Tourism and Culture Industries, and our mandate is to market Ontario as a preferred destination. Early in the pandemic, we started to build a framework of our roadmap to recovery. It included a number of marketing campaigns, starting with a support local initiative in 2020, followed by a series of campaigns this past summer as vaccination rates and restrictions eased. And now we are activating our seasonal Ontario market plans with work pending for the spring. We're also planning a US Drive market campaign, and we're re-engaging with our key international markets of focus. The Ontario market is a critically important market for many regions, operators, businesses, and festivals and events across Ontario. So I did want to share a little bit of data about that Ontario traveler. So to provide some context of what makes up tourism receipts in Ontario, here's an overview of some data that outlines spends and stays by market. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this information. And as you can see on the left there, Ontario is a huge market, of a source market for visitation in the province, which is consistent with most provinces and territories in Canada. And while we look to other markets in the rest of Canada, US, and international markets, it's no surprise to see the length of stay and yield increases. So each market plays a really important role in generating revenue for the industry. We conducted some segmentation and travel intent research in 2021, and we will be repeating it again in 2022. So I want to share a few nuggets of data that we have here. So showing this slide here indicates, Ontarians have a very high affinity for travel in Ontario. You can see here that 80% of respondents had indicated that they would be taking a trip in Ontario in the next 12 months. And of that, 64% said they'd take both a day trips and overnight trips in Ontario in the next 12 months. You can also see across the age categories at the bottom there that we have a good, strong interest from essentially 18 to 59 for both overnight and for day tripping, as well as in GTA and non-GTA. So there's a really healthy audience here that's engaged and interested in experiencing Ontario. I'll also share this with you too. This bell curve is likely no surprise to anyone on this webinar, and I'm sure echoes a lot of the areas of focus for festivals and events experiences here in Ontario. We see that that bell curve on travel intent. So we asked respondents when they planned on taking their next vacation in Ontario in the next 12 months, and you can see obviously strong interest in spring, summer, good interest in fall, slightly lower interest levels in the winter, which is also part of why Destination Ontario is working on an off four-season campaigns each year to help to make sure we're encouraging early planning for spring, summer, and then supporting additional planning for fall and winter. But the nice thing about the spring summer headspace for the traveler is they are in vacation mode. They're interested, they want to hang out, do something fun. They're interested in being around the province, and it's a great opportunity for them to look for activities that they want to do, like experiencing festivals, events, concerts, music, etc. We also asked in our study what types of trips Ontarians are planning to take. So there's an array of trip types here that they respondents reported back on, but you'll see kind of the top areas at the bottom there indicating things like nature and experience and outdoors, camping, romantic getaways, and family trips with lots of kids activities. These are great buckets because we know that within that, the types of activities, a lot of couples, for example, going to a concert or going to a festival is a huge part of that experience that they're really interested in doing. Or whether it's kids activities and a family vacation, again, the food festivals, the kids concerts that are available and community events are all part of that, as well as opportunities for them to capitalize on as they're planning their trips. We also asked respondents to estimate what they think they would spend on their trip as well, just to give us a proxy for revenue. And you can see here again, there's a fairly generous yield amounts across the different types of trips, but you can see those high yield trips like road tripping and RVing and motorcycle touring, as well as things like family vacation with lots of children's activities have a nice higher yield number. Sports oriented trips like golfing, fishing, and hunting. So just a couple of examples of what Ontarians expect that they would spend on some of these trip activities that they have. So that's a little bit about the Ontario market at a baseline level, just as we get into talking a little bit more about signals of rebuilding from the Ontario market, which I know is really critical to everyone, especially with your 6 to 8 week planning cycle. So I've grabbed everything I could find that I thought might be helpful. So I have 2 data points that we've been following really closely for the past 2 years. I know they're a little bit small, but I'll talk through them. So thanks to Destination Canada's research, we have insights into how Ontarians are feeling about traveling. And this chart has 3 lines on it. You'll see the top line that is teal is how confident Ontarians feel about traveling or exploring their local communities. The orange line, which follows a very similar trend line, is how comfortable Ontarians feel about traveling across the province. And then the pink line at the bottom is how they feel about traveling in other provinces or territories. So you can see the trend lines are quite similar, but the great news here is that we've been watching this for a long time. This is not a huge surprise. It very much mimics what's happening with restrictions or the health conditions, etc. However, we are seeing, as of February 22nd, 2022, so just a couple weeks ago, some of the highest levels we've seen since the pandemic started, with 85% of Ontarians feeling really good about, 88% of Ontarians feeling good about traveling locally, 85% feeling good about traveling around the province, and up to 71% of Ontarians feeling good about traveling outside of the province. So these are really excellent signals of intent, of comfort and intention on getting out there and re-experiencing Ontario. The other data point that we've been following a lot of is how residents feel about those travelers coming into their communities. So this has been an area as well. I mean, certainly no community comfort of hosting is an important part of the travel experience. So again, we're seeing some of the highest numbers we have in a long time. You can see back in March 2nd in 2021, it was at 44, 36, and 29% respectively. And those 3 lines mimic the same thing. So the teal line is how comfortable residents feel about welcoming locals into their community. The orange line is how comfortable they feel welcoming Ontarians into their community, and the pink line is how comfortable they feel about welcoming other Canadians into their community. Of course, I know we saw a lot of change during the pandemic, where people were going to a lot more rural areas, looking for open spaces, and of course there was demand in conservation areas and parks, and so this has very much, I think, reflected the changes of how people are maybe not been used to seeing as many guests in their communities as they had in the past. So again, though, all signs here are really turning to a positive sense, where we're seeing 78% of locals feeling comfortable having locals in their community, just shy of 76% for welcoming people from the rest of the province, and about 68% for welcoming other Canadians. So we've really seen an uptick in that level of comfort and welcome, which is a huge part of that visitor experience. So this is another data point too that I reached out to the team that we know at Google to ask for as many data points as I could around signals of intent from search data and volume. And so this is an interesting one here. I just wanted to share it with you as an opportunity to sort of another signal of intent of consumer confidence. And you can see right where that arrow is pointing, where the solid blue line has kind of taken over the dotted blue line. And what that means actually is that we're now seeing a stronger domestic travel accommodation. So, sometimes when you can type into Google, you can get hotels and there's other listing information, for example. We're seeing a stronger lift for accommodation interest by Ontarians in Ontario than we were actually the year before this time. So it's actually now usurping and going back up to those pre-Omnicom domestic travel levels. So that's another great sign that people are looking for places to stay, which means there's revenue, yield, and they're moving about the province. This is another data point that I grabbed. This is from Leger's research. They do a national pandemic tracker study. It isn't a perfect data point, but I did want to illustrate it just to sort of show how quickly things can move. So this is actually pulled from December 7th, 2021. That's the latest report I could get my hands on, which of course was when we were seeing levels rising again this past December. However, I wanted to point out though that in December, we had 36% of people feeling comfortable attending large gatherings, such as sporting events, concerts, or festivals, but it had decreased from 41% that was reported the month before, which had been even higher the month before. So I just wanted to share that data point with you to show how quickly that can change, even month over month, which I think is a great sign for confidence building in those types of experiences. I mean, I watched the Raptors game the other night and gosh, that was a great signal of intent as well. Again, another data point from Google that we grabbed. And so this is a chart you can see, and what I'm going to get into next, a little bit about how people how Ontarians are searching for festival and events information. And so from a keyword perspective, it tends to be in 4 buckets: festivals, events, concerts, and music festivals. And so you can see those different colors aligned with those. And you can see this is a 5-year chart. So you can certainly see search volume and consumer interest across the last 5 years. Obviously, you can see where it drops down dramatically, which is obviously when the pandemic did hit. You can see a spike from last summer, especially on the events, that sort of reddish orange line last summer when we saw some events coming back. And then you can see the search signals for the other 3 areas. I mean, by far the volume around events is the highest term that are used by Ontarians when they're searching for information. But I thought that was an interesting, it just gives you an interesting baseline to see, from a recovery perspective of goals on where we can see, hopefully where we see volume changing over time as its rebuilding starts to happen for this critical industry. Also sharing a pool out of that data from the last 90 days and sort of ignore that little dotted line at the end where it drops down. That was just because there was no data left. I just couldn't figure out how to make that go away when I was pulling the data source. But the good news is that they're seeing over the last 90 days, Google is reporting that they've seen search interest in events picking up. And this was pulled, I believe, on February 22nd or 24th. And they've seen a 52% increase from February 1st to February 22nd of looking for festivals and events type search terms. So again, I think you've got a real opportunity there as a signal of intent that we're seeing that demand start to pick up again, especially as the weather hopefully starts to get a little bit warmer and spring starts to be on the heels and more announcements come with types of events and experiences that are going to be happening this summer and fall. And I wanted to share something else with you, and this isn't a list of order in terms of places, but what I wanted to show you here was, if it's helpful for any of your planning, is just how people are searching about things in different communities. So again, those colors come back into play here. So festivals is blue, events is that orangey red, concerts is yellow, and music festivals is green. And so what this is showing you here by city or region is that what people are searching for either associated with that place or from that place from a festival and events frame. So for example, here you can see these 5 destinations, for example, Fergus or Huron East. The search volume that was large enough to index, all the search terms are looking for there are all related to a search term anchored in events. Versus moving forward, you start to see, in Grimsby or Mississauga, for example, you start to see both festivals popping up, of course, because there's a ton of great festivals in those regions, and you're also seeing concerts pop up. So events is still obviously that search term that anchors the bulk of searches, but you're starting to see the lift in people searching for festivals and searching for concerts. Again, you can see in these regions as well, you're starting to see a lift for Brampton and for Markham in both concerts and in festivals. A big lift for Halton Hills around concerts, for example, with Sega Beach as well. Also Windsor, you can see here. So these are things that people are searching for and the types of terms they're using to search for that information. Again, sharing here, obviously we start seeing a little bit more lift around concerts in Guelph and London and Pickering and Oshawa and St. Thomas, and also a lift there with festivals, but events staying the dominant term that people are using for the bulk of their searching. And then we'll see this here as well. And then you have our first little pop here of music festivals for Ottawa. Obviously, they host a ton of great music festivals in Ottawa, so that search interest is starting to lift up. This is just in the last 90 days. It could look very different when you pull data in a week from now or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but just giving you a sense of terms that might help your marketing, your communications as people are looking for things, to know how they're looking for stuff related to festivals, events in those regions. And then a few more examples here for Hamilton, Cambridge, Collingwood, Barrie, Niagara Falls. You're starting to see a lot more around concerts coming through, stronger pull around festivals, but still a dominant search terms around events. And then again here you can see Kingston, Brockville, New Tecumseh, Cornwall, and Timmins. Again, lots of concerts for Timmins interest there. Seeing a lift also for New Tecumseh and Brockville, and then a little bit of music festival search for Kingston. And then a few more examples here. You can see again, for example, Owen Sound having a large pull for concerts, and then again, events being the dominant keywords. Just a couple of examples that I wanted to share in case it was helpful. And then what are people looking for? So the top rising queries in the last 90 days, so this is just people typing into Google looking for things. And it's all index search volume. So some of the top queries that are coming down, you can see the top things that people are looking for right now is around Indian festivals 2022. So interest in whether those are happening or when or where, music festivals 2022, and famous music festivals. So you can see though that the volumes on the right-hand side. So for example, the top search increase is around Indian music festival, that's 650% increase over whatever was indexed last. So it's not a hard number, it's just a relative number based on volume. And then another thing I wanted to share here was just where those source markets were coming from. So the source markets for the queries around Indian Music Festivals 2022, for example, are heavily driven by consumers in Toronto, Mississauga, and Scarborough, for example. And then, source markets for Music Festivals 2022, for example, are heavily driven by Ottawa, followed by Toronto consumers. So it just gives you a bit of a sense of where they are and what they're looking for. The chart below it as well gives you some outline around some of the way people are typing things in or keywords. So again, no surprise here, I'm sure, but things like Family Day Events 2022, people looking for things to do with their family. And then you can see also, and that's why the volume is all, it's an indicator, it's not an absolute. You can see things, words like events fuel things like Olympic events today. So it's not that volume is not necessarily 100% a festival and event related. There's lots, the word event could pop up in other things like NBA All-Star events, for example. But you'll start to see trends like Family Day events near me. The near me trend is certainly something to consider, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So this is again another go at queries for the last 90 days. And I wanted to show you the different ways that they're looking at the volumes that it's being typed into or being searched against. So Music Festivals 2022, that's your highest query around festivals as a query word. And then you're seeing festivals near me. So people just trying to figure out what type of festivals or events are happening near them. And then you can see Indian Festivals 2022 again popping up here, and that famous music festivals as well. So these are just different ways that the keywords are working, but to give you a sense of how people are typing things into Google. And then the below chart also, again, it just kind of demonstrates how consumers are starting to look for ways to stay entertained. So, your top volume for around Toronto, looking for Toronto events. Obviously, this is the last 90 days, so there was a lot of query around Christmas events, events near me, events today, events in Toronto. So again, people looking for things that are happening, for something to do and something new to experience. With that, that's I tried to provide some signals that I thought might be helpful from an Ontario perspective, but I did want to just share a couple of insights as well about the American audience too. And I recognize that I'm almost done time, so I'm sorry, I will go really quick here. But just to share with you, obviously the Global Tourism Watch is a tool that Destination Canada uses, and there's still great volume and interest in the Ontario market. And Ontario still does hold the highest share in terms of visits and expenditures across Canada. So the American consumer is obviously very important to our market. I just wanted to show you just where the volume of spend is coming from. So we certainly see New York topping the list, closely followed by Michigan, obviously two of the closest states to us from a drive market perspective. And then you start seeing places like California popping up, which I'm sure has a high interest in Toronto, for example, and surrounding area. Anyways, I won't spend too much time here, but I did want to highlight a couple quick things. From an American traveler perspective, there's a lot of little indicators and the things that they want to do that I thought would be relevant for this audience, knowing that as you're doing your planning, that there is interest from a US audience, depending on the types of things. We see things like trying local food and drink, food festivals, local drink and food festivals. We start seeing things like experiencing attractions, etc., around interest of things that they like to do here. And one of the things I thought was really interesting was just around that target audience. So we've done some work around the US drive market I mentioned. So we've really been digging into this target and what they prefer and what their passions are. And you can see, for example, in the bottom left-hand corner that high yield, kind of high yield traveler or guest attending events is about 42% on their travel preference. It's something that they want to do, that they're interested in, that they want to have a chance to experience. You can see on the right-hand side there under exploring arts and culture that, there's a lot of passion points with the amazing work that this group does. Music is a big passion. We know that they want to go to concerts. They want to involve themselves in arts and culture experiences. They want to learn about other cultures. So whether it's cultural festivals, food festivals, etc. There's just a lot of opportunity there with that US consumer that we certainly weave into our work at Destination Ontario. And I know many of the regional tourism organizations and the DMOs do the same thing as well, because we know it's a driver and a passion point. The other thing I wanted to show here too was just, again, we're looking at that accommodation data, and it just gives you a sense of, again, I'm looking for signals of intent or confidence here. And from a Google perspective, and from an accommodation demand, Canada is now in the top 5 of accommodation queries. Everybody wants to go to Mexico. I'm sure we all would love a beach holiday as well, but you can kind of see the Mexico, Dominican Republic off the top, and then you see kind of Italy and the UK from a European perspective, and then Canada's at number 5 there. So while not a proxy, it's a proxy measure, but it does show that we have something to offer those consumers, and we know that they bring both yield and they stay longer in Ontario. And then with that, I just want to share a couple of considerations for the future, and just to sort of recap some of the points we just talked about. So positive signals of intent for both US and Ontario are definitely there. We're seeing research intent for festivals and events increasing month over month. One little nugget, and the minister spoke about this too, and I think this is very true based on the data we've seen, and Google verified this for me as well, is that they're seeing this trend of enjoyment everywhere. People having a new appreciation for joy in life, especially everyday life. And there's an opportunity potentially to consider that sort of messaging or that sentiment in marketing materials and ways that you talk about the events and the great experiences that you have to host. I think we're seeing signals of intent that comfort with crowd levels is starting to change for sure. As I said, that Raptors game I thought was a great signal of intent. There was thousands of people there. I know BMO's got their home opener this weekend for the TFC, and so I think we'll continue to see people getting back to things that they love. The work that Festivals and Events Group here does is this is a very passionate work, whether it's about passions around food, music, experiences. So there's so much heart there to tap into. And then there's 3 last things I would just leave with you that the digital user experience and expectations of consumers is very high, especially the last 2 years has absolutely accelerated digital expectations. So understanding how people are searching and how to make your information as findable as possible by all the algorithms is definitely an opportunity to show up with authority as people are typing in and looking for things to do. And then search tends to be location specific. So there's a lot of stuff around Hamilton events near me, for example, or content specific, as you saw, like music festivals or music festivals near me. And then timeliness. So events in Toronto this weekend, for example. And then last, I just wanted to leave you with that festivals, events, and music experiences are definitely high on consumers' wish list of things to get back to doing. And I think, and I hope that we see that quickly as your industry works to rebuild, and we certainly will be there to help spread that message as well. Sorry, Dave, I think I went a little long.
No, Melanie, some
sharing.
great information and no questions in our queue.
Sorry, Dave, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, so we think you've hit on everything. Thank you very much for everything you and your team at Destination Ontario does for our industry. We know
I'm so
you're
sorry.
always there.
I'm not able to hear Dave. I apologize.
Oh.
Maybe I did something wrong.
Jay, can you hear me? Hello?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I can hear you.
okay. So Melanie, I think you have an issue, but thank you very much for being with us. We're all glad for all the work that you and Destination Ontario does for us throughout the year, and especially during the pandemic.